button is there. So we'll start off by just quickly stripping off my charts of indicators. And we'll start from a nice clean chart. And we're going to go through all of the indicators in the invite only of ours, and we'll go one by one and we'll talk about them and we'll have a play and see what you can get out of it, because I really want you guys to be able to learn and understand more. So we'll start off with trend detection system, which we often call TDS. Trend detection system is one of obviously the more recent ones. It's very much something that's just about writing trends, and there's a lot of conditions that go into it. There is an LMI in there, there's a BACD in there, and some various other price action things in there as well. And when all of them agree, that's when the stars will show up and you get your candle color. And then it plots a line. The line is actually just the high or low. No, it's the close of like the last 3 candles or something. I can't remember from memory, but I think that's what it is. I think it's just the close of the highest or lowest of the close of the last 3 candles. And then it just trails it out. And then from that, you would have like a rough idea of a stop loss if you're completely stuck. And by completely stuck, I mean someone that hasn't got the idea of using an ATR, using support and resistance for it, using ideas of price action, or having fixed pip goals. Like realistically, there should be a better way of doing it than just the close, but it's an idea. I would also argue maybe even doing it just off of the high or the low of the last 3 to 5 candles and trailing that way would probably be better. I might even change the indicator to do it to the high or low of instead of the close price. But there's an idea, but that's roughly how it works. You have a couple of different things in there. You can see that you've got your R value and delta period and length. They come from the BACD tool, LMI. And you can see that you have a few other things like an MA filter, and that's for a long-term filter. So if you wanted to filter out signals so that you're getting more buys in a uptrend and then sells in a downtrend, that's what's controlling it. So if you want it to make it less trend specific, you set it to a nice low period like that, and suddenly you're going to get a lot more entries. But you may also find that the quality of those entries goes down, because you'll be trading both against and towards trends. And that's how you would play with it. So you would just edit the moving average MA filtering length in there. And that's really all that there is to TDS. It's not an overly complicated indicator to use. It's just one that you're very much going to use it with other indicators. It's not something that many people use standalone. It feels like it lacks when it's just alone. So the next indicator on the list we'll go is pip onto Trend Scout. Trend Scout was one of the very first indicators that I built. In fact, it was the third. No, it was the third. The aim of pip onto Trend Scout was that it would ride a trend, but it would also very quickly change its mind on the direction of the trend. So the idea was that it would snap out of a trend and then snap back into the next trend. And you can really sort of start seeing that in some of these sorts of areas where you'll find where it's in a trend and then it can very quickly be out of the trend and into another one. The downside is it can get quite choppy. If I find a point like here, you'll see that it'll be like, oh yeah, this is bearish, bullish, no bearish, no bullish. And it can be a little bit choppy, which is one of the not so great things about it. Editing its settings. Now there are 7 different mathematical calculations that go into the percentage score it gives, because the way it calculates that is its percentage score of the total of all of the individually weighted options. So there's 7 options, each has a weight to them, and it's the total score of those that gives you a percentage. Now, if you want to adjust the settings of it, it's not so easy. You do have to really be careful with this, what you're playing with, because some things have different weights to others. The way I kind of said it in the beginning was to just get like a happy medium, where it was kind of quick, but not ridiculous. I feel that some of the more recent indicators would probably be slightly better. However, depending on the method you're using, you might find that it just gives you enough. It's actually okay to ride a trend with, but I wouldn't use it on its own. The next one we will go with is SS. Now, SS is going to be having an update over the next week or two, and I'll explain the update. So with SS, what you get is a lot of sort of support and resistance levels, and they're drawn. So as soon as price became under, in this case, 0.7, then it draws them all the way down to 0.6. And then as soon as price would break up above 0.7, like over here, it will draw them all the way to 0.8. And it will do every single thing where it will draw these massively, both physical and psychological levels. And there's a reason I can call them that. The way Pip Hunter SS draws it is based around a Fibonacci and its relative volatility. So on this case, you're looking at the 8 hour, you can see that it's a Fibonacci that goes from 0.7 to 0.6. And you have the standard common levels, and you can see that that's where you're getting all of these nice little wick taps and support and resistances from. If you want to drop down the time frame, and this is something that's going to be in the next update for it. In the next update, I'll have a button which says like short term, like short time frame, but currently it's not there. To get the best out of it, if you're on a short time frame, all you do is you take your fib and you draw from the one line. So I'm going to draw from this line here to this line here, and then suddenly you have all of these short-term targets, and you can see how accurate it is with the little wick taps just through here and all the way up into here where it's become resistance again, and even back through here. So that is a good way of using SS to get you those nice little short-term targets, or even use it towards the idea of a stop loss if you're using it as like a place above or below it, just to give you a target for a stop loss. You'll note that things like gold, if I go to gold, it's going to display very strange, and there's a reason for it. Gold displays like this because it has to take into account the volatility. Because of the pricing, it has, first and foremost, I gave it dominance towards crypto because they're more volatile. If I plotted gold's volatility on a crypto pair, then it's going to draw it, and it's not even going to be usable on like the 20-minute chart. So what I did was I coded it to give it priority to crypto, and that gold, the way you would use it is that with gold, you'll just have to simply go and do this. And then sometimes even still, you may have to do another level down where you would grab the, so you're essentially grabbing the fib of within a fib. Like so. And again, you can still see that you'll still get good accuracy where you're picking up wicks and good support levels. Even to this wick over here, which literally lands directly on the line. So that's the sort of downside to how it's currently set up with it being on such a high volatility and time frame. Now, the signals from it, they're okay if you can consider them on trend and you have a good a tool for confirmation. You can see that it just gives you a label, and then it will keep the candle colors set until you've got its inbuilt exit signal. If I quickly change my colors not to orange, you'll see it a little better. If I just change my candle colors to black, for instance. Then you'll see that when the candles are orange, you'd be looking towards a buy, and when they're white, you'd be looking towards a sell. I'm just going to grab another water. And you'll see that it selectively chooses ones that are on its trend, on its little trend. Now, it can be adjusted. In fact, all of these adjustments are towards the signal and not towards the distance for the lines. And you can change them here. Some of them you'll be like, I'm not so sure if that's very good. Some of them you'll be like, it's okay. The threshold filter is the colored line through the center for reference. If I change that to 60, you should see it change. Should see it change, yeah. If I change it to 200, it should change more. Or if I change it to 21, it should come in even tighter. So you can change the threshold filter. You can also change the periods and the other baselines it's using to find its signals. Overall, I tend to use SS mostly for the levels it gives. You can use it for signal generation, however, it's not so great unless you're using it combined with other things. Again, using things together is always going to be the best way. Right, next indicator. We will go to Speed Scalper. Now, Speed Scalper is the second most recent, and I'm going to quickly change my candle colors back. So Speed Scalper is literally designed to be the entry and exit tool. It's not about how long it will ride a trend. It's about saying, I've had enough of the trend, or I haven't had enough of the trend. It's only really good for very short-term things. If you're looking long-term and want to, like, if you want to catch this whole move, don't use Speed Scalper. If you want to catch like this much of a move, do use Speed Scalper. That's exactly what it's for. It's designed to be your entry and exit tool. It is not designed to ride a trend. You can make it, however, it's suboptimal at best. You're better off using one of the longer term tools, and we'll cover those later. Like if you were to look at Momentum Extreme, it will tell you bearish from probably most of that, where Speed Scalper is literally just an instantaneous here to here. The other thing to note with Speed Scalper is that when things do get a bit wild and you get things that get quite overbought and oversold, it will give you these little dots. They can look pretty magical at times. I mean, if you were to look at this one, you'd be like, hey, that's pretty good, because you had been able to just immediately go and look towards that little move. In the same way that you've got these coming through, but yeah, okay, you might have been able to make something from them, but it's not great. Like, for instance, if you picked this one, your entry would have been like here, so you'd have had to have got out over here, and you'd have been in drawdown all the way through here, and it would have probably been like a one-to-one trade if you didn't get stopped out. If you took like these ones over here, you'd have looked great because this is right at the top. So you can take them, but take them with a pinch of salt and make sure that you have something else confirming. Again, this one over here looks pretty good. You would have had that wick for drawdown, but all the way up to here was plausible. So you'd have had a decent looking trade out of it. And again, there's another one over here that would have just ripped straight in your direction. And there's this over here where it didn't really do anything. It came back up and then went. So Speed Scalper is kind of usable. When it comes to setting Speed Scalper, my general guide is leave it alone. You can adjust it, and I'm going to give you some examples. So if I make this like 3, I'll make this like 15, you can make it longer term, and it will still be very, very quick reacting. Like, for instance, you've already got a full bearish signal by this candle here. So I just draw that blue line, and a full exit by this candle here. However, you lose some of the accuracy in terms of finding those very, very rapid signals. If I was to compare it, and I'm just going to set it back to default very quickly, you would find that in this consolidation, it's already having mixed signals because it's like, this is just consolidating, it can go anywhere. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not so much of a fan of adjusting settings. And you can see that the difference between the entry on the two was this candle on the higher time frame one to this candle on the lower time frame one. So you can get quicker as well. In the same way that in theory, if you were to just taken like the first signal, you'd have ended up with this, which would have taken from here to here, and that would have been profitable where the other one wasn't, because you're off the bottom of this candle and running to the top of this candle, which would have netted you like 0.1 pips. So speed scalper, the general guide is leave it alone, and if you're going to use it as like an entry exit tool. And you can also look towards the idea of using the green and red dots it forms. It doesn't form them very often. In fact, if I very quickly just remove the fill color and everything, just so I can compress it right down, you can see that's how often so I'm on the 15-minute chart, and from the entire month, you've had like, what? Maybe 20, 30 dots in an entire month. So you're not going to get a lot of signals. I would hope that they're on average relatively decent, but you'd have to confirm them with other things. It's not something you can just take on its own. Next indicator. LMI. LMI is probably like one of the favorite indicators for a lot of people. LMI has two real main ways of using it. Now, lots of people use it just as it is, where it's like just green and red. But then a lot of people also do what's called shark out of water. Now, if you've ever used a TDI, which is based off an RSI, with some Bollinger Bands, you'll have seen a shark out of water before, and that's just when you're taking it as a high momentum thing, that you would take your buy as it breaks up out of there and close as it breaks back in, or you take your short as it breaks down out of it and then close it as it comes back in. And you can use shark out of water in that way, and that's again with the TDI. You can do the same sort of thing with logistics map index, and we've had strategies done based off that before. I recently have been playing with it where I just set this to like circles and just set it to really big so that I can see it very easily. Whoops. And then I remove everything, leave that completely default, and I literally just compress it to give me almost like a up and down bar. So it's nice and compressed on the bottom of the screen. I can just see offhand very quickly the first candle it showed up on. So for instance, the first buying candle here was that one. And the first selling candle here was this one. And I can then just very quickly see it offhand, and it's not taking up a lot of screen space. It's nice and simple to play with it that way. If you're going to use shark out water, and I'm going to reload it quicker than then you can start looking at various other clauses for why you would or wouldn't enter. I'm just going to adjust this setting to 16. That setting is responsible for how quickly the bands move towards it. So if I set this to like 300, you're going to see them sitting square through the middle. And if I set them to 16, they're going to stick to it very well. If I set them to 40, it's sort of like a slightly less sticky. And you're going to see that, yeah, shark out water does work. Would I trade like that? Probably not. I feel that there's probably, if you can feel the momentum from using other indicators or support and resistance breakthroughs, then you're probably not going to need to see the extra momentum of a shark out of water. You'll just be able to see that it's red and go, oh, it's red. And that should be enough. Next indicator we will look at is flip and ride. Flip and ride is obviously the newest. Got a lot of good fun things we can do with it. So flip and ride, very, very straightforward. It's just a cloud, and when certain conditions are met, you'll get a little bear or a little bull. And when certain conditions, other conditions are met, you'll get like a little smiley face or the upside down smiley face. The smileys are anti-trend, and the bull and bear are with the trend. So if you consider that from here we're in a downtrend, you've got a little bear to say sell into the downtrend. If you consider here we're in an uptrend, when it got right up close, it was like, hey, this is still an uptrend, and gave you a buying signal. That's how it works. Where the smiley faces are all counter trend, there's a lot of fun ways you can play with them and how you're taking them. And when we go on to combining indicators in a minute, once I've gone over each indicator, then I will show one of the ideas I've had more recently with it. And you might be like, oh, that's something interesting, or it can be ignored, but at least you'll have seen it. So for now, let's just flip and ride. There's not a great deal to it. And we'll go on to BACD. BACD is an interesting one. I'm going to quickly go to style and set it to area, because it's going to look a lot better on your screens, as well as mine. BACD has been set for very short time frame for the default settings. 15, 3, and 28 is a very aggressive set just to get in and out quite quickly. However, it's still not going to be anywhere near as quick as something like LMI can be, and certainly not as quick as Speed Scalper. BACD is very good for riding trends. I would say the reason for it getting out can also be very good, because it normally just tends to get you out when there's more consolidation or a slight bit more of a serious pullback, where LMI can sometimes be too hasty. Sometimes it can be just one candle and LMI will freak out and be like, oh, this is the end of the trend, and BACD will still be like, no, not yet. So BACD in that regard can be a little bit smoother. There are loads of really good settings for it. I quite like to just smooth it out a bit more and go from 15 to 31 on the slow EMA. It smooths it out a bit more. Yes, that means that you can be holding a trade for slightly too long. However, I would rather be in a few trades slightly longer than a few trades slightly too short, because this is a time where some of them will kick you out. Some of the other indicators can kick you out too early. If this one kicks you out just slightly after the peak profit, then so be it. And then you can also set this one really long if you want. So I'm on the 15-minute chart right now, and I've got 31, 3, and 28. If you're someone who only ever really sits on one time frame, so for instance, you're someone that scalps on the hour, you sit on the 15-minute chart, but you want to know what like the hour trend is doing with BACD, just times all of your numbers by 4. So if I'm in like 12, 124, and you don't have to worry about the BACD average, you can adjust it, sure, but it's not going to do a great deal of difference for you. So you might as well just leave it as it is. And then you would essentially be seeing what the BACD is doing on the 1 hour, while still on the 15-minute, because you've just multiplied the number by 4. So you can see that on this one, it was bearish from this candle here all the way to this candle over here. And you can see that we're currently in a bullish trend. You had a small bullish run just through here, and then another bearish run from here to here. You can also consider things like divergence from this indicator, and you can consider small divergences in LMI. I'll go and show those off in a second. However, when you're at significant levels of movement, and defining significant levels in BACD can be somewhat difficult, you can see points of divergence. For instance, I'm just going to draw it from here to here. because my thing is coming up in the middle, I need to quickly just, so you can draw divergences like so, and they do show up sometimes. Divergence in BACD doesn't tend to work as well as divergence in LMI, but then there is one thing in LMI that no one else you'll see really know, because actually you've never really told anyone. I suppose the thing we can show it from first is GME. Now, most people here are probably aware what happened to GME last year. And I'm going to jump to the daily for this, and we're going to put LMI back on. This is going back a couple of steps, but it's worth showing you. When you have significant spikes in price, so for instance here, you'll see that LMI will just go and rocket off to a new number. So for instance, in this case, it's like 400 trillion or something ridiculous. When it does that, it's pretty good as a sign to say, it's going to stop here. It's just a thing that LMI has done very, very well. It worked on Luna as well, and I'll go show it off Luna. You can see that even here, it's ripped off to like -15 and started working its way back. If I go to Luna, which is now Lunk, from KuCoin. Ah, okay. So I have to go to Luna as in. Okay, how do I see Luna 1.0? Okay, this is irrelevant, but basically when Luna was dropping, it showed up on the LMI on like the lower time frames, and that when price got to the very bottom, it leveled out on LMI, so you could then start predicting that you were able to catch a little move back up again. And I managed to get 300% ROI from that, just simply because it was like, oh, LMI has stopped and spun around at the very bottom. And for me, that was enough just to have a little play with it. I didn't make a lot of that because I only put a very small portion in, but due to the risk. However, it did prove that it would work again in the same way GME held last time around. And with GME, for the people that would know them, I first really started talking to Brutus when GME was just about to pop, and using LMI alone, I told him, hey, it's going to spin on the spot. He didn't listen. He didn't pull out in time. So I know that he went from like a lot up to not as much up as he could have been. And yeah, that was my first introduction to him, when I was like, you need to sell on this day. And everyone was like, what? And I was right and no one else was right. You can ask Arian about that because he was also there. So we'll go back to looking at other indicators. We'll start with, go to momentum extreme. So with momentum extreme, there's a lot to look at. Now, I'm going to make it really big and make the chart really small. These green and red bars are showing the Heikin-Ashi candles on different time frames. So with most multi-time frame Heikin-Ashis, you'll find that they repaint. These ones won't, and there's reasoning for it. It's kind of in the code. But yeah, you'll find that most multi-time frame Heikin-Ashis that you'll find do repaint, and these just can't. Once the bar has closed, they physically can't change. The bottom bar, which is white and purple, that's just a small trend tool. It's somewhat bearish biased in terms of it will go bearish before it goes bullish. But that's normally because bearish trends tend to be a bit more aggressive than a bullish trend. Bullish trends, if you were to look at them statistically, last longer but move slower per candle. than a bearish trend normally ever does. Bearish trends normally tend to be quite aggressive, and so to have a tool which is biased towards bearish trends is somewhat beneficial. And then you have a wave that looks very similar to Trend Scout. However, the one for Momentum Extreme doesn't change as quickly, nor is it calculated based off the same factors. So with Trend Scout, you have 7 very, very quick acting factors. With Momentum Extreme, there's 12 individually weighted factors. Most of them are a lot slower. They also measure somewhat different things. And you can see that compared to what Trend Scout would look like at this level of zoom out. In fact, I'll go grab it. Trend Scout should be very choppy. In fact, that's not as bad as it could have been. But you'll see the points where it gets a little choppy and stuff, where momentum's just pretty straightforward. Normally, momentum is my favorite of the two, just because it is that bit smoother. When I'm running with a lot of things, often I will just turn off the time frames for the multi-time frame Heikenashis and leave myself with just a wave in the center. It makes my life a little bit easier. If you want to know what the timeframes are for the Heikenashis or want to change them yourself, they are literally listed from top to bottom. And you have the 5-minute, the 15-minute, the 60-minute, the 2-hour, the 4-hour, the 8-hour, the daily, the weekly, and the monthly. So that is what those green and red bars are showing timeframe wise. And then we have the last indicator, which is baseline overlay. Baseline overlay is really a tool that you can use to bring any method together. And it gets very messy, but you can also clean it up significantly. I'm just going to very quickly drop down a few timeframes just so it cleans itself up a little bit. Now, we're going to work from top to bottom of the screen because it's very messy, and we're going to then cover everything. So on the bottom of the screen, we're going to first note the little labels that say uptrend. The little labels that say uptrend are multi-time frame settable, and they are related to the teamer ribbon. The teamer ribbon, it is essentially its own teamer ribbon to get those little up and down trend markers. Because if I show you here, these are set to the 4-hour, and if I set this to the 4-hour, you will see that they will line up near enough to the same point. At each point, you'll get a downtrend, and you will then get the same uptrend label. So if you're looking to do like a twin teamer and you only want to have one teamer on the chart, you just want to know roughly what the other one is doing, you don't care where it actually is, then you can set the up and down trend markers and just have those turned on. But I'm going to run through, and as we talk about things, I'm going to go and turn them off. So that's the up and down trend markers. Next, you'll notice are the green and red dots. Now, if you're someone who's ever seen a method called the Lakers strategy with Forex, you'll know it's about 2 and 7 moving averages. And the green and red dots are directly related to the 2 and 7 moving average. Again, they're multi-time frame settable, so you can come down here and go trend time frame for the bottom dots, and you can go and set them. So if you're someone who trades the Lakers strategy and you're normally on like the 1-hour chart, you can, or the 15-minute chart, you can see what the 4-hour chart is doing, for instance, or you can go and see what the daily is doing just by having your bottom dots set to it. And if I will turn them off, the next thing we'll cover is the little pivot points on the chart. So you see your higher highs, lower lows, higher lows, lower highs, lower lows, and you'll see a little ray coming from them. They're very, very simple. They are just fractal calculated. They're one of the very, very few things I've ever done that have a degree of repainting, and that's just simply due to the nature of fractals. With fractalization, you do have to have a little bit of repainting to get them working properly, and that is how your high highs and lower lows are printed. You will find that sort of these most recent ones won't reprint now that these are here, just simply because price action has moved too far, but you'll have, normally it's like 5-10 candles it can repaint for, no more. So you can see all your little higher highs, lower lows. There is even an alert buried in the alerts for it, that is called fractal break arrow, and that is the universal direction breaks. If it broke the higher low here, it would give you an alert, and if it broke the higher high here, it would also give you said alert. It's the way of just very quickly going up. We're going to go make a new high, or we're going to go make a new low. Nothing overly wild. Next part of the chart we're going to look at, and I'm going to very, very quickly turn these off. High, 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 low, lower, high, lower, low. And the pivot levels, we'll turn those off. Oh, we can see the main cloud running through the center. This is just a very bog standard EMA cloud. You can change the EMAs. It's these top two settings here. You have one that's got, and I'm going to change it to like 50 so you can see it come off of the candles, because that's how I drew it originally. You can now see that it sits there, and you can set that to whatever you like, whether you're doing the weird 669 and 1004 thing that I like, or you're doing some other method of having EMAs. You've got a couple EMAs there that you can set if you want them. Next thing is they are this one, and then they are this plot here. Now, the next thing to note is this very square looking ribbon here. That is the TEMA ribbon itself. The TEMA ribbon looks like so, and I'm very going to quickly just going to set it right up to like the daily chart, and you'll see that it just gets bigger. It basically plots a cloud based off a couple of TEMAs, and again, multi-time frame settable. You can use them often as a dynamic support and resistance. When you do so, it in fact, when we get to methods in a minute, I'll show you what I mean by the dynamic support and resistance, because you'll see it once and it will make more sense than me just explaining it. Next thing to look at will be first quickly removing it from my chart, which is all the way down here. This plot here, and this one. And now we're getting really down into the bare bones. We have the little flags. The flags are based off of a little signal that's basically saying that the trend is coming to an end. It's very early, and sometimes you'll find that it can be too early. But yeah, it's just trying to tell you that, hey, the trend is at an end. From memory, they're fractal based. They might not be. But in general, I don't tend to use them. Some people do, and some people start looking at taking counter trend trades as soon as a flag shows up, because it means like they can get in early. However, for me, that seems like it's quite a risky idea. I need to cough one moment. And I'm back. So the flags, you can use them. Again, they'll only also show up on the direction of trend if things are relevant. So in this case, you can see that they're only printing red flags on the bottom for the selling ideas. And here they're only printed greens because it was looking for buy ideas only. So that is the little flags. Now we're going to cover the stars. The stars are often considered like the jewel in the crown of Pip Hunter baseline overlay. They are what everyone gravitates towards. They were probably the most like influential thing of baseline overlay. Everyone goes, how do I trade the stars? Sometimes it can be really annoying as people are only looking at stars. Sometimes it can be beneficial because it stops people looking too far into other things. The stars are okay. I set them up as a very happy medium. They aren't perfect, but they're good enough on enough things. What do I mean by that is that, well, you could probably go and back test on an individual pair on an individual time frame and refine your stars just for that. When developing the indicator, I had to give settings that it would cover as everything as best it could. And so I made one setting that was just like, here is a happy point where it kind of works on everything. It's not the best. You can certainly refine it, and I will show you which boxes it is, but it's good enough. And it was certainly good enough for the trade floor because they copied that piece of code and my settings. So the settings obviously do kind of work. But if you want to change them, it's this fast period all the way down to this slow range. And if you change these things, then you will get different star points. So for instance, if I just set it to 2.6, you can see you just got a lot less stars. Set it down to 1.6 and suddenly these ones come back in. And then the same way I can set this up to like 140. And you would go and miss some of them. And again, I'm just going to play with some various things, and you'll see that the frequency and the positioning of the stars changes. And just jump that below it. And I've just broken it completely. Oh no, there is the odd star. So that is the baseline stars. We're now going to go and remove those. Next thing we'll cover is the little ribbon that runs through it. That is a Bill Williams alligator, except I have recalculated it to handle the offset so that it's just a Williams alligator with the offset removed. It stops you looking at it into the future, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with. Nothing overly wild in that bit. Then you've got the little Fibonacci it draws. It shows you the high and the low and where it's drawn them from. And then you got your little labels for 78, 61, 38, and 23. I omitted 51 because I was drastically over the maximum outputs. And also the 50 is the one that holds the least. You'll tend towards finding that the 618 and the 382 are much more important than the 50. So I omitted the 51 to save space, and 2 because it was on average the weakest of all of them, and you just don't need it so often. So that is the high-low, which is these 2 shapes here, and then these 4 shapes here. Now we're really running out of things on baseline overlay. We have our other trend, a couple other trend tools, which are the red and green pluses. Red pluses for an uptrend, green pluses for an uptrend, red pluses for a downtrend. Nothing overly wild. There has been a method that was made, it must be almost 2 years ago now, where someone used those pluses and a combination of the stars. So they would, and I'll explain it later, where it was about a triangle formation of the stars occurring in time with a plus. I'll go and explain it after we've finished the indicators, but you can use them. I don't overly use them. Some people do like them though. So if I go and remove those, just little buy and sell labels. You have our little chop detector. Now the chop detector is trend based as well. So when it's dark green, that is a bullish trend, but it's very choppy. When it's bright green, it's a bullish trend with no chop. And when it's dark red, it's a bearish trend with no chop. It's a bearish trend which is choppy. And when it's bright red, it's a bearish trend with no chop at all. So you can see that when things are moving up nice and smoothly, you'll have nice bright green candles. When things are just moving in more of a flat line, you'll get much duller looking little spots. And again, the same can be said when it's in a downtrend. You can see that it goes bright red when you're getting nice smooth movement. And that is that. The next thing to be aware of is the candle colors themselves. You'll note that my candles are currently 4 different colors. You have the black candles, the green candles, the red candles, and the white candles. Now, they are based off of a very modified RSI tool, which is basically telling you almost the momentum of it. Because when you see a black or a white candle, they normally tend to come in hefty trends. And if I show you that, I don't know, US 30, for instance, would be a good one to show them. You'll see that you'll get nice long runs of black candles, and you'll normally get good runs of white candles. In fact, here's a couple of examples where you've got like 4 consecutive, and you've got a dozen of them here. You'll find that the green and red is like the minor momentum swing, and the black and white is the major momentum. Sometimes you'll get it where they just won't hit that full momentum, but you'll also get times where it just sees one white candle and just rips, or you'll see like one or two black candles and they just rip. That's your candle colors for baseline overlay. And then the only other thing we have to look at is this little hidden button. It says show levels as fractal chaos channel. If you've been a member for a while, you'll know the chaos coaster method. This was how you find it. This is how you get to it, where you just turn the chaos levels on, and it basically shows you the pivot points that the thing displayed, except it shows them in real time and where they hold. So you can see, if I just very, very quickly go like so. I need to grab these as well. You'll see that it's when this comes up to here, that's when that one got painted. When this came up to here, that's when that got painted. When this came up to here, that's when that gets painted. When this green one comes up to here, that's when this one gets painted, so on and so forth. So that's why they don't print in real time, but you get to see how they then got printed. But it's very, very nice to know the actual level in real time, and what you can do is just trade the breakout of the levels, which is how Chaos Coaster became a method way back when. And that is baseline overlay. Does anyone have any questions on the indicators? If not, then I will jump into method making and we can play with methods. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to do that while I have a drink.